Hello everybody, today we're... What the fuck? Persona 3 is my favorite video game of all time, but by no means is it perfect. I mean, fuck this version of the game, and fuck these quests. In general, Persona 3 Portable plays like a leapfrog game. Other than Persona 3 Portable, Persona 3 is still my favorite game of all time because it's gotten me through some really tough times, and in general is the reason why I wanted to start this channel, no matter how small it may be. But nevertheless, it's had an impact on me personally that I've never experienced in any other media. And especially with the new release of Persona 3 Reload, I feel like there's no better time to talk about why it helped me and why it's my favorite video game of all time. And yeah, I beat Persona 3 Reload in the first week. I'm fat, I know. Persona 3 was first released in July 13, 2006 and was a massive change of the Persona formula, where instead of following a generic JRPG formula like the first two, it would introduce many new mechanics that we know and love, such as... Alright, let me name a few. Social links, the calendar system, teammates having their own specific personas, and well, for Persona 3's case, them being AI controlled, which... gameplay fucking sucks. Social stats and the compendium, just to name a few. Thanks, dude. Did a good job. No problem. Essentially, they were trying to mix together dungeon crawling and social sim into one genre. And these changes would change the entire landscape of the Persona series, as we see it being the norm for the big three in the series. The game's director Katsura Hoshino, lead art director Shigenori Sojima, and Shoji Meguro, who composed the entire soundtrack for Persona 3, were really the big three of its development, and after its release would go on to develop other Mega 10 and Persona games. And you can really see their charm in a lot of the other Mega 10 games. For example, Sojima's art is prevalent in almost every Persona and Mega 10 game, and just look how good his art looks, oh my god! Now with the addition of Persona 3 Reload, Persona 3 has 4 versions, so what are the key differences? Persona 3 the original, which is the one that started it all and redefined the series. Persona 3 FES, which is really the expansion of Persona 3 and the most played version. Think of what P5R is to P5. FES added many new mechanics and stories like The Answer. And Persona 3 Leapfrog. Sorry, I mean Portable. While being a complete downgrade in gameplay and playing like a visual novel, and don't get me wrong, I love visual novels. Some visual novels are some of my favorite games of all time. Doesn't excuse this game from playing like fucking dog shit. It still added many new cool features, with the most obvious one being the addition of a female protagonist, which, oh my god, I wish it was in Reload. And the addition of Theodore. Listen, I'm not gay, but Theodore makes me feel some type of way. And now, Persona 3 Reload, which after completely 100%ing the game, it was really easy, but still 100%ing the game, I can say, in my opinion, that it is the definitive version of Persona 3, and it might be recency bias. Persona 3 has never looked or played better, and they fixed a lot of character issues, especially with Strega and a lot of other things. But it's essentially got the characters and the story of Persona 3, which in my opinion is the best in the series, and the gameplay of Persona 5, which if you don't like the gameplay of Persona 5, I don't know what's wrong with you. But it does lack the answer. Never mind! It does lack the addition of the female protagonist, which really does suck, but you kinda gotta deal with what you got. But hopefully for Persona 6, we do get a female protagonist because it just adds so much content to the game and is really a fun way to experience the game. But back to the gameplay, just let me rant for a bit. Old Tartarus does have its points. At the time of release, it was innovative. Technically 264 floors that were all completely randomly generated with their own cool design and style. It was fucking sick, but playing OG Tartarus fucking sucks. Like, I genuinely get sick from being in Tartarus too long because I have to look at the same assets constantly because of course I'm trying to complete all of Elizabeth's quests, and of course she asked me to get these weapons that are in these chests that are luck-based, meaning that I have to search for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and never fucking get them! And you could just say, do one half of Tartarus in one day and the other half in another. No! Who the fuck plays like that? Am I a fucking baby? Okay, I'm sorry, that was a little bit uncalled for. I just have a lot of PTSD with Elizabeth's quests and these weapons, but let's not talk about that. Let's get on to Persona 3 Reload's Tartarus, because oh man, that shit's good. Every block, while still being randomly generated, just looks so much better, because like, obviously it's a fucking remaster. Of course it's gonna look better. They added breakable objects and more chests that make the game actually feel really fun to explore and way better than the original. And guess what? They made it so the weapons for Elizabeth's quests are luck-based. Thank you. Thank you, Atlas. And with the new clock mechanic, it makes it so grinding isn't as tedious. And look, I get that this is kind of like a big thing for people because some people like to grind, some people don't. I'm kind of in favor of grinding, but I do like it as it's a kind of like it's a cool asset to have there. But the way I play Persona is just kind of grinding the Reaper late game. It's fun, come on. Just overall, it's a huge step up in quality from the original Tartarus, and in general, this game is just so good. Just play Reload, it's really that good. Jungian psychology has obviously been a very big inspiration for the Persona series. I mean, Personas, Shadows, the Philemon, like come on. The shadow in Jungian psychology is the blind spot of the psyche and basically being the repressed id. It's an unconscious aspect of the mind that doesn't correspond with the ego ideal, which is essentially what one wants to become. The shadow is the part of the ego that it doesn't want to show, essentially the part of yourself that you don't want others to know about. Now, obviously, there are definitely other parts of Jungian psychology that are more portrayed in the other Persona games than even in Persona 3, like the collective unconsciousness and etc. But the use of shadows and its connection to the collective unconsciousness in Persona 3 is used to prove a different point. But first off, let's start with personas and shadows. For Carl Jung, the persona is the conscious mask, what you or version of you present to the world. And the subconscious repressed id is the shadow, like I mentioned before. We see this more in games like Persona 4 really being present in the narrative, as it takes the effect of people's weaknesses and flaws and one accepting those weaknesses and flaws. But in Persona 3, shadows are associated with everyone's shadows in the form of a collective unconsciousness. This is like Persona 5, but it focuses more on how each of us deal with death. Everyone knows of death and that it will happen. Some fear it and some invite it. And this fixation and obsession is eventually what gives birth to the fall and Nyx. Personally, I love the introduction of Nyx. First, Strega tells us that we brought against the fall by falling directly into Agutsuki's plan and that there's nothing that we can do about her. This is further proven by Ryoji being the appriser of the fall and him begging us to kill him so that we don't have to face her, because that's literally just how strong she is. She's described as all-powerful and will be the end of all living things and is especially unbeatable. Nyx is the pinnacle of death. I will. I'm just gonna chill a little bit, but there's no boss fight in gaming, at least that I've played, that feels so scary. Nyx is all powerful and you can feel it from the moment the battle begins to the moment it ends. Nyx is a force that humans can't defeat. She defies logic. She's freaking terrifying. Not to mention she has 14 phases that each match a different arcana. And something I really love about the boss fight is how before each phase starts, she gives a little explanation about how each arcana is and like the lessons in the cycle and pretty much how they connect to the fool's journey, and especially once she gets to death.
And devoured the fruit of knowledge, he sealed his fate. Entrusting his future to the cards, man clings to a dim hope. Yet the arcana is the means by which all is revealed. Beyond the beaten path lies the absolute end. It matters not who you are. Death awaits you.
But something else I love about, and I mean, God, I love a lot about this game, but is how the tarot card of death is represented. I'm not an expert on tarot cards, but a quick Google search can tell me that the death arcana is often misinterpreted. The real meaning of the death tarot is, well, the end of something, but also the beginning. In essence, it means change. We see this directly in Persona 3 from Ryoji's different changes. At first, Deathwell looks like Thanatos, but is not fully formed yet and is sealed into a young Yuki Makoto. And no, I'm not saying his other whack-ass name, it's Yuki Makoto, which later is changed into Pharos, a young child form, then into Ryoji, a fully human form, and finally Nyx, the embodiment of death. I view all these changes as essentially a metaphor for each part of one's life. From Pharos, who is young and naive and always wanting to learn from Makoto, to Ryoji, who is similar but yet mature and understanding, and finally Nyx, the end. What I'm getting at is that it seems to me as though the character of death, Ryoji, Nyx, whatever the fuck, are symbols for the stages of our lives and our growing acceptance with our own eventual departure from life. Ryoji being the embodiment of death, aka the appriser, is a symbol for how it is in our lives, how we essentially invite death into our lives blindly. Ryoji comes into the story at a completely random time after killing all 12 of the major arcana shadows. He quickly becomes our friend, we have many laughs with him, and he feels like he's a part of the group, but all of us, and even him, are blind to the truth, that Ryoji is death. This could mean many things, but I took it as a metaphor for how death is in our lives. Death is there when we are happy, death is there when we are sad, death was there when we were born, and death is going to be there when we eventually pass. Death will follow us no matter where. It is always looming over us, whether we know it or not. Ryoji, when he finds out his true identity, gives Seize one final ultimatum: to kill him, forget everything, and blindly die without ever knowing what happened, or to let him live and try to kill the avatar of death, Nyx. Even in these two options, death always follows. In each choice, death is present. This comes back to a big Jungian concept that is really a big inspiration for Persona 3 and overall the entire series, called The Fool's Journey. It is essentially the story of every main Persona group as they all tackle the Fool's Journey. Essentially, the Fool's Journey is, the Fool is the protagonist who travels through the Four Suit Kingdoms encountering characters who represent each and every major and minor arcana. Now, this is also connected to Jung's other theories of archetypes, but let's not delve into that. Now, this happens in every Persona game, but takes a more literal sense in Persona 3. As the main cast kill all the major arcana shadows without realizing it, brought death closer to them, made the dark hour worse, and brought Nyx's arrival. But like in the Fool's Journey, the Fool is unaware of the hardships he will face as he ventures out to learn the lessons of the world. And when they do learn the truth about the world and that they brought the forthcoming of Nyx, this is when the Fool Arcana is reborn into the Judgment Arcana. As now they have been enlightened with the truth of the world and are able to make a deeper judgment. The Fool has been reborn, his false ego self has been shed, allowing his radiant true self to manifest as he's discovered that joy and not fear is at life's center. This is why Seize and the main character are able to forgive their mistakes, as they were ignorant and tricked by Akutsuki. Now, they can make the necessary decision about the future to not kill Ryoji and fight death head on. As with their new conviction and understanding, this is truly when the Fool's Journey is completed. The Fool becomes the World Arcana, signified by Makoto's persona changing into Messiah, as now he can harness the power to seal death, but with a cost. His own life, but his friends and the world's happiness. Like in the Fool's Journey, the world states, one last time, because he acts from inner certainty, the whole world conspires to see that his efforts are rewarded, his accomplishments are many. Meaning he finally completes the Fool's Journey, and in the final scene, lets him truly fall asleep and face death with a smile on his face. You really thought the video was over. You really thought the video was over. We're just getting started. We are just getting started. You still gotta look at this ugly mug. The video's just getting started. Next point. I feel like Strega as a group of individuals and really an antagonistic force in the Persona series is really kind of taken at face value. A lot of the villains in the Persona series are often really evil people, except for some. But Strega, if you really look at them at face value, they're a fatalistic, nihilistic group of individuals. And at that, they're not even the main antagonists of the series, but they are, like I said before, an antagonistic force. But what people forget, and I mean, I don't know, maybe people don't forget this, maybe people do see them like this, and maybe I'm just dumb, but is that Strega is supposed to symbolize something in all of us. Strega is a group of Persona users condemned to death since they were experimented as kids by the Kirijo group, and they honestly, understandingly so, chose the easier way out and followed their fatalistic impulses. They were already condemned to death, so they lived life risking it all and going to the darkest places mentally. And yes, they are completely wrong, but you can kind of understand where they're coming from. They are condemned to die. They have that certainty, and when you really take it at face value, it's kind of sad. As Takaya said, he was given power he never asked for in exchange for his life. But even in the end, the game does show them some sympathy, not by saying that they were right, but by allowing them to see the results of their actions. Game knows that they're wrong and is really hard on them, but it also understands the fucked up situation that they were given. So it gives them an out in the story that isn't just saying how evil they were. They are not right by any means, but they're an understandable reaction of facing death, and that's the point. And even in the end, Jin and Takaya face death directly without ever running away from it. One of the best metaphors in Persona 3 are the Evokers, as visibly being guns, and for one to activate the persona, one must shoot themselves in the head to call upon them. Well, you could technically ask, aren't they just killing themselves? Or, how aren't they dead? Well, that's because the Evoker is supposed to emulate the feeling of one killing themselves. Now, why is that needed for them summoning their personas? As in the other Persona games like 4, you smash the Arcana card that you own to activate your persona, and in 5, you take off your mask, revealing your true self to activate it. So why in Persona 3 must you effectively kill yourself? Well, that's because you have to accept the fact that you are mortal and that you will die to activate your persona. Essentially, it's to have conviction in one's life. The fact that you're okay with your death shows that you can confront yourself and that you have the potential to harness your persona. And this comes back to another big concept in Persona 3. It's right behind me, isn't it? Memento Mori is a Latin saying, and when directly translated into English, it means remember death. It essentially reinforces the narrative that one's life is not eternal, but rather finite. You might not think about it all the time, but it is always looming over you. Death is inevitable. And this saying is very important in Persona 3. I mean, it's even in the opening. Come on. The reason it's so important is because of the way that Persona 3 tackles its themes of death. The whole game's narrative and characters deal with it in different ways. But I want to go into how the story uses its characters experiencing death to further push its narrative of overcoming death. And I don't mean in the sense that you can directly overcome death. You cannot do that. But more so, overcoming the fear of death and learning to understand one's meaning and purpose. As we see throughout the game, it shows us many different forms of how death influences and changes our lives. Essentially, it shows that death is tackled in a multifaceted way. This is shown mostly with our main cast, as an acceptance of death in one's life prompts a change in their personas. Akihiko endures the trauma of losing Shinjiro, his childhood friend. But as we all know, unless you're playing the female route, yeah, you weren't saving his ass. This leads him to reflect on his past failures, especially in his inability to save his sister Miki, as this event shaped Akihiko's determination to become stronger to protect others. However, Shinjiro's death forces him to reevaluate his single-minded pursuit of strength, realizing that his obsession blinded him. He resolves to let go of the guilt, live on, and finish what he started. Ken, driven by a thirst for revenge against his mother's killer, this need for vengeance consumes him. Pause the video for just 1 second. Listen, I know a lot of people don't like Ken. I mean, his voice is really annoying. But like, if your mother got killed, you wouldn't at least want to get a little bit of revenge? Just a little swing up in there? Come on, stop hating on Ken. He displays a completely normal human reaction. It's just, he's a good character. Stop hating on Ken just because he's a little annoying piece of shit. This is until Shinjiro, his mother's killer, challenges his beliefs. After Shinjiro's death, Ken grapples with the idea of living, but ultimately chooses to honor Shinjiro's wish by living on and fighting for justice, realizing that revenge would have only perpetuated his suffering. Yukari struggles with her father's involvement in the Dark Hour and his mysterious death. This leads her to having inner conflict and doubt of her father's true nature. Upon discovering the truth about her father's actions and that he was trying to save everyone, Yukari resolves to carry on his legacy by fighting for her father, finding closure, and living a meaningful life in his honor. Fuka is really the only character that doesn't deal with a significant death in her character arc, and if you ask me, she's kind of the most boring out of the main cast. Don't hate me because I'm telling the truth. I know people like her, but don't hate me. But pretty much Fuka faces the fear of rejection and strives. I ain't trying to hear all that. Junpei is initially insecure and self-loathing, but Junpei's life changes when he meets Chidori, who brings out his caring nature. Despite Chidori's involvement with Strega, he still cares for her, and eventually at the climax with Strega, Junpei ends up getting killed by Takaya, but Chidori sacrifices herself to save him. Because of Chidori's sacrifice, Junpei resolves to live on, acknowledging that his life now encompasses both his and Chidori's, and that now he must strive for his and her future. Mitsuru battles with the burden of her family's past mistakes and isolation driven by a need to redeem the Kirijo name and protect her father. Through her struggles and mishaps of trusting Akutsuki resulting in her father's death, she gives up on trying to stop the Dark Hour. But with the help from Yukari, Mitsuru realizes that she's not alone and learns to rely on her friends and find purpose in their shared goals, moving forward with a newfound determination. Aigis, initially a machine fixated on her mission, she grapples with her past failures and insecurities, and eventually learning to forgive herself and embrace her humanity. Even after losing Makoto, she finds her own purpose in living for herself, embracing fulfillment and happiness independent of her original programming. Finally time for Mr. Makoto Yuki. I felt like out of all the main protagonists in the Persona series, Makoto just has so much personality and is my favorite of the main three. And yes, I like him better than Joker. To be honest, he has the best personas in the series design-wise. Orpheus is sick, Thanatos is the best design in all the Persona series, fight me on that, and Messiah is a perfect persona for Makoto after his eventual acceptance of his own death. Makoto, due to being a silent protagonist, leaves up a lot of interpretation for the choices of selections for dialogue he has. But from the start of Persona 3, Makoto is dark, depressed. I mean, anyone who lost both their parents would probably be and feel the same way. But his overtime growth and acceptance of his situation, I mean, Dude literally has death in him. But from a character that didn't really care about life to becoming one that cares about the people and bonds around him is touching, and his final persona being Messiah is a perfect representation of that, as Makoto decides to effectively save everyone from the fall and sealing Nyx. Not to mention hold on to dear life just to keep a promise to his friends. Makoto went from being apathetic to passionate and caring about life and the people around him. And a story like that coming from a silent protagonist, you just don't see it often. Okay. It's finally time to talk about why Persona 3 has had such a profound impact on me. I really don't want to make this segment depressing, but I do have to delve into some topics about death, and to be completely fair, that literally is the entire theme of the game. I'm going to be talking about why essentially this game means so much to me and how it changed my life and my entire ideology on death. It was March 2021, and probably up to this point in my life, it was one of the hardest months I've ever had to go through. In this month, I would lose two extremely important people to my life, and before this, only one other person in my life died, which was my great-grandmother. And to be completely fair, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like 7 years old or something. And don't get me wrong, I do miss her, but I was too busy playing Bakugan Battle Brawlers on my DS to care at that age. But back to what I was saying, both my childhood dog and grandfather would end up dying in the span of 2 weeks, coincidentally while I was playing Persona 3. First, my dog Chloe. She died due to having too many seizures in one day, so me and my family made the decision to bring her to the vet to take her out peacefully. I still remember this day like it was yesterday. I just stared in awe. I didn't talk, I just stared. As I saw something I loved so much have its life sucked out of it, it was sad to say the least. And to be honest, I didn't cry. And then, even while I was trying to grieve my dog, someone else more important ended up parting ways too. It was my grandfather. He was always a special person in my life, and when I was younger, my parents would always be absorbed in their work, and I don't blame them for that. I completely understand. And I know they did their best for me, and I will always thank them, but I never really got that attention, and that's where my grandfather came in. My mother would always drop me off at my grandparents' house, where me and my grandfather would play with Thomas the Tank Engine toys and watch Sesame Street. Long story short, but my grandfather shortly after was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. This was horrible to watch, as a man that I knew as a happy person who never stopped smiling would be in pain. Not to say that he wasn't his old self the same, but I was too scared, so I would run away and essentially never go visit him. I was ignorant, to be fair. I was a kid, a young teenager. I didn't understand the concept of death, and I never had grief until my dog, and life didn't really give me a chance to make amends. As I said before, a week after my dog's death, my grandfather soon followed. As I stood above him in pain before his passing, the only thoughts in my mind were why? Why is this happening to him of all people? Why was I scared to face him? Why didn't I make more time? Why didn't I listen to those dumb lessons your family members tell you to spend more time with them? It was infuriating more than it was sad. Like for my dog's death, I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. It wasn't deserved of me after what I did. I ran away. I didn't deserve to grieve. This prompted me to absorb myself into media, to forget it all, essentially running away all over again because, to be quite frank, I was scared of death. What little did my dumbass do was pick the game that forced me to confront it, as I already started my playthrough of Persona 3, so I had to finish it. But this comes back to another point. I played Persona 3 at a perfect time in my life, and while playing Persona 3 Reload has further proved that to me, as its themes and specifically its ending has stuck with me. Persona 3's lessons are to remember that you are mortal, but don't let it haunt you. You are mortal. You have been blessed. It is limited, don't get me wrong. Life is not forever, but that's what it means to be mortal. But the narrative that Persona 3 pushes and what it taught me is that I need to live my life to the fullest and not let past guilts define me. I deserve to cry. I shouldn't have let my mistakes define me. I still had a great relationship with my dog and my grandfather, and just because I messed up along the way, it doesn't define our relationship. I have to not let the fear that the relationships and bonds I make are going to disappear define them. As a matter of fact, that's how life is. People come and go. No, life is not forever, and it's obvious, but it's more reason to live life how you want it, and to the fullest. But like these characters, I need to live life for myself, and find meaning. And well, even if there isn't, well then I guess I'll just be a fool. God, we're finally done with all that sad stuff. So let's finally talk about the social links. The social link mechanic introduced in Persona 3 is really the identity of the modern Persona games, and even still, Persona 3 doesn't have the best social links in the series, because that title belongs to another game in the series. Though Persona 3 does give 4 a run for its money, I do admire how in 3 you specifically feel like a bystander in your social links. You can't change their lives as they take action to change their own, and that's something I love so much about the Persona 3 social links. Something I also like about Persona 3 social links is that they all tackle specific problems at specific ages. And I feel like it's such a good way to cover these themes, as you can probably relate as you've had similar problems at these specific times. And it's that attention to detail that I love about Persona 3's social links. But to be brief, I'm going to be summarizing the social links that I like, and in my interpretation, try to tell the lessons that they are trying to teach. Akinari's social link I think is mine and a lot of people's favorite social link throughout all the Persona games, as he's such a genuine character that you can probably relate to. I mean, hopefully you don't fully relate to his problems, because I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Akinari's entire social link is about finding the meaning in his life. He obsesses over trying to find the meaning in his life due to his life ending soon, so he ends up deciding to write a book. And in his writing, Akinari comes to the conclusion that he shouldn't focus on finding the meaning in his life, but rather the effect he has on others. The story that Akinari writes is a metaphor for his life, and that his meaning is that others can find him through his story. Akinari for me was a touching link, and the only other link in the entire series that I can think that comes close to its feeling is the Death Arcana in Persona 4. But Akinari's link is beautiful in how we see a man who hates his situation become sort of understanding and learn to deal with himself with the help of the main protagonist, but mainly Akinari himself. Akinari learns to find the meaning in his life and happiness through what truly makes him fulfilled, which is spreading his story and being able to connect with others. And once again, with his story being left behind, this means that Akinari's soul and meaning will be left behind for others to see through his story, being just like the pink alligator's sparkling lake. Beibei's pretty cool. What do you expect me to say, some groundbreaking? Kenji's link kind of highlights the beauty of adolescence, being ignorant and just enjoying life, showing us sort of nostalgia. I know a lot of people have negative opinions about Kenji in this link. First of all, look. Can you really blame him? Second, I personally really like how this link feels unrealistic yet realistic at the same time. We've all wanted something we couldn't attain, and even though if you look at this link at completely face value, it is extremely shallow, it really is kind of a great link because you can probably relate to it, whether it wanting to be with a hot teacher or having a goal that's completely unrealistic to you. It's a part of enjoying life and especially living it. Odagiri's link shows that just sometimes you gotta go with the flow. Work hard and push for your goals, but at the same time, life is supposed to be a ride, not a drive. Sometimes you drive the car and sometimes you're the passenger, and you have to be okay with that. I don't know if that made sense. I kind of made that up in 2 seconds. But what I mean is sometimes you can control things and sometimes you can't. That's why life is a ride. And this link perfectly shows that with Odagiri's inability to find out who smoked in the bathroom, because maybe it wasn't meant to be. Yuko's social link talks about the dilemma of not knowing what you want to do in the future. This is a very common problem for many people at her age and, well, even a little older. The future, quite frankly, is extremely horrifying to think about, and even me personally, I don't know what the hell I want to do with myself in the future, and sometimes I just want to think and not be rushed. Hell yeah, man, this shit about to be...
Is that a fucking monk?
Mutatsu runs away from his problems with his family by drinking at a bar almost every night, but over time realizes that running away won't solve anything and decides to make amends with the people he loves. Mutatsu's dilemma with his family shows a situation and a common belief that people can't change, and especially in old age. This link shows first off that it's never beneficial to run away from your problems, and second, it doesn't matter what time it is or how old you are, you can always change, you just have to make the effort. God, this video is finally coming to an end. To be honest, that final scene with Aigis, that scene alone is why I love Persona 3. When I first saw that scene, it made me think about how my grandfather went. Did he really get to do everything he wanted to do? Was his life fulfilling? It made me consider myself and my life. What about me? What do I want? How do I want to live my life? And well, when it's time for me to go, will I be fine with it? Persona 3 really tested my view on my mortality and made me think about how I wanted to live my life and if I wanted regrets. Obviously, I can't change that, but it really made me want to delve into myself and search and understand first off who I am and second what I want in this lifetime. As I said before, Persona 3 is a big reason as to why I started this YouTube channel and further why I live the way I live my life. So in that sense, Persona 3 is a big part of me and the man I've become today, which I'm not fully proud of yet, but I'm starting to get there. I didn't learn a thing, and it took me to finish Persona 3 to really teach me this lesson. And to be completely fair, I'm not saying that Persona 3's message is a completely unheard of narrative, but it was for me. It's obvious, but once you're in a state like that, it's kind of hard to see the truth. Life isn't fair. Life isn't righteous. Life doesn't care about you. But what I'm saying is that for me, and the lesson that I learned from Persona 3, is that life is not about the destination. It's about the journey. It's about the bonds you make, but not whether they'll disappear or go away. It's about having them in the first place. Essentially, life is about you and how you want to live it. All of the characters show us different problems that we all face in connection to attaining that meaning in our lives, and that death, this ominous presence that hides above us, doesn't control that. While we are victims of death, we are also the ones who can conquer it. And I don't mean that you can beat death. You can't do that. I mean that you can make the most out of your life while you're here, as it's a gift to be here in the first place. The way to beat death is to live happily. It's very hard, but I'm sure it's goddamn rewarding. Life could end for any minute, for any reason, for any of us, and you only live once, so why spend it wasting away when we could be striving for something? It doesn't have to be world-ending or life-threatening either, just something to make life worth living, because quite frankly, life is too short to spend it alone or aimlessly, because no matter how far, how you go, how long it may last, venture life and burn your dread.
風の声光の粒まどろむ君に注ぐ忘れない優しい微笑